everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and in today's game overview and gameplay video, I'm going to be showing you Skytear Horde from Skytear Games. This is coming back to crowdfunding, including an expansion at the beginning of May. It will be landing on GameFound. The exact date will be in the pinned comment and video description. Also, if you haven't checked out my unboxing for Skytear Horde, you're going to want to do that to understand all the components that come inside the deluxe version of the game, which is what I have set up here on the table. I'll put a link to it in the top right hand corner. What we're going to do inside of this video is I'm going to take you through an overview of the game, including what I have set up here on the table and what each of these different aspects and components are. And then we're going to dive into gameplay. You're going to see a handful of rounds to get a great idea as to what Skytear Horde has for you. Skytear Horde is a lane-based card battler in which one or two players fight against the horde of monsters controlled by the game itself. Now, players say, including myself, that Skytear Horde gives them the feeling of playing a solo or cooperative version of a competitive card battler such as Keyforge, Hearthstone, or Magic the Gathering. Now, in the 6 lanes of the battlefield, which are a little bit covered up by the box I have on screen at the moment, you're going to be battling monsters that are trying to attack your castle. While beyond the enemy line, smaller minions are going to try to pillage your resources as you're playing, forcing you to discard cards from your deck each turn. You lose the battle if your castle is destroyed or your deck runs out of cards. You win if you destroy the portal, spawning the monsters and the epic monster leading the horde. As I've set myself up for a solo game, let's go over the components that you can see on the table before we begin some gameplay. First off, we're going to start with the tokens. The tokens you're seeing here are the fancier ones coming from the deluxe edition. The standard and retail edition of the game has cardboard tokens. I want to draw your attention to the 2 smaller tokens right here. We have at the very top, the smaller one is the health token, and below it, if you actually flip a health token over, you have wound tokens on the bottom. Same thing for these larger ones up top. The next tokens we have are the attack token, which is this one here, giving an increased attack value to the specific card it's tied to, or the weakened side of that token, which shows a broken sword. The next token is the armor token. You'll see that reflected right here, so a positive armor, or you could potentially have a pierced armor token when it's flipped over. Now, there are some additional tokens within the box, but the only one you need for the solo game is going to be the one that has a flag and a number 1 on it. So we'll take the other 2 out of the equation, and during setup, it's going to instruct you to place it on the 0 space of the mana track. Now we need to set up the portals. Easy to find. These cards look like this, having this kind of framing around the outside of the illustration. Also worth noting down here at the very bottom of the card to the left of the phase number, which is in the middle, this case 1. To the left of it's a small single individual icon, meaning that this one is specific to solo play. There are 2 others which make up phase 2 as well as phase 3. For now, all you need in play is just the first phase. The other 2 can sit out of play, but within easy reach. Next, let's set up the minions for the game. There are 4 of them, easy to find them inside the box, and when you do, you're going to place 2 on the left and 2 on the right. If you have the playmat, you'll also easily know where they go because everything is watermarked on the playmat itself in terms of where these are positioned. The other thing to note is that some of the minions will at times have health or other things added to them in terms of tokens based on the portal card. So take a look at the setup instructions. In this case, it's telling me that this specific minion, not this one, is going to gain an additional health off the top from the very beginning of the game, and the other 2 on the far right-hand side are as well. Now, these 4 minion cards are set up outside of the lanes, which are in the center of the playmat, in a zone called the back line. Now we're going to build the Horde deck, and we're going to find all the cards which have an icon very similar to what you can see here on the cards in this deck. I've already gone ahead and put these together, but I'll show you an example of them. So for instance, if you're looking for the common ones, they're easy to denote as they'll state common right next to what they are. So this one is a spell, and it states common. So you're going to find all of those cards, and then you're going to pair them with another set of your choice. Now, when you're picking a set at the very beginning for your first game, I recommend, as the rulebook does, Renegade. And again, in order to determine the set, very easy, taking a look at the middle of the card to the right of what it is, it states Renegades. You're finding all of the Renegade cards. You're placing them inside of a deck, taking all the common cards, placing them in a deck, and shuffling them together. It's as simple as that to put the Horde deck together. Let's move on to the Outsider pile. Now, as you play through the game and you're continuing to fend off the hordes of monsters and other creatures coming at you to take down not only your castle, but also deplete your entire alliance deck, because either one of those conditions can result in a loss, the epic monster behind all those hordes is the Outsider. And in this case, it tells us for our very first game to go ahead and set up the Hatebringer. So we've done this. We've got the first phase Outsider in the first slot. The second one can just sit out of play for later later on. There are a number of different outsiders to choose from, and also there's a number of different castles, which is the next thing we're setting up here, and the rulebook tells us to choose the Gaping Maw as our very first one, but there are other ones as well. You'll see its health point value in the bottom right-hand corner, as well as an exhaust ability here that we can potentially make use of during gameplay. Next, we have the Alliance deck. Very easy to put this together. You're going to have 4 different color cards inside of the box. Blue, red, green, for example. And in this case, I've gone ahead and chosen the blue deck. The rulebook specifies you should avoid the green deck for your first game. I've chosen blue. You're going to take all 40 of these cards, shuffle them up, and that's going to create your Alliance deck. So I've gone ahead and shuffled up the deck, and at this point we're now going to draw 5 cards to start the game. My hand is comprised of the Tuscan Warriors, Clan of the Falcon, Frostbite Outpost, and 2 Speak with the Spirits. Now at this point you can mulligan, so you can choose any number of cards from this first hand of 5 you've drawn up, discard them, and then draw that many cards back up. It's recommended that you actually look to try and get as many ally shapeshifters as possible in this starting hand, especially when starting out. I've gone ahead and discarded the 3 cards on the right-hand side and redrawn 3 new ones off the top of the deck. We got Clan of the Oak, Clan of the Wildcat, and Shamans, which we have a number of allies here, which is great. Worth noting that the mulligan is completely optional. You do not have to do it. In this case, I was happy to do it. I went ahead and discarded 3 cards. One thing you don't want to forget is to place these cards back inside the Alliance deck and shuffle them again. You do not want to forget this, because if you do forget this, you're actually hurting yourself from the outset while playing the game, as one of the 2 ways to lose, as I talked about before, is to lose all the health on your castle or to drain your Alliance deck completely. So don't forget about that. Shuffle everything back in. And that's going to complete the setup for Skytear Horde. Let's now focus our attention on understanding how the game flows and operates. Let's use the reference cards included in the box that show the turn phases at a high level, and I'll walk you through each and every phase. Here's a look at the reference cards inside the box. This breaks down the turn phases, and you can see all the phases of the game: Refresh, Horde, Alliance, Treachery, Fight, Pillage, and End. Will sum up the entirety of a game round. It's worth mentioning, if you're new to Skytear Horde, you're probably not going to want to just reference this card setup here. You're going to also want to cross-reference with the rulebook for each of the phases until you get comfortable, as there's more detail in the rulebook than there is shown here. Now, if you obtained Skytear Horde from the first crowdfunding campaign, you either have the deluxe or you possibly have the standard edition. In either case, the rulebook's exactly the same, but after they released, there was a rules clarification document that was put together by Skytear Games in order to further clarify some of the rules within the rulebook. That is a digital version only. You can find it on their official site, or you can go to Board Game Geek in the files section and find it there as well. Again, the reprint coming up on GameFound should likely have all this stuff merged together in the second printing of the game. All right, with all that out of the way, let's move into the gameplay. We start things off in the refresh phase. We're going to be gaining some mana, and we take a look at the portal card that is currently in play. We look in the bottom left-hand corner, and it tells us how much mana we're getting. So we're going from 0 to 4. The next step of the refresh phase is pretty obvious. You're going to refresh exhausted cards. Of course, we don't have any because we just began the game, so we'll skip past this for now. But essentially what happens in Skytear Horde is you're going to have cards coming into the different lanes. They're going to situate like this on the play mat, if you have it, and then when you actually exhaust them, you're going to go ahead and just move them down a slot, and that's going to let you know that you've used their exhaust ability. At this point, you would bring those cards back up. We now move into the Horde phase. During the Horde phase, you take a look at the portal card again and reference the top number on the card. So this card over time is going to shift like this. You're going to always reference the very top of the card in order to find out how many Horde cards are being drawn in a given round. So in this case, we have 1, which I've drawn. It came out as a monster. It's called Deep Stalker. Now, a monster, as specified by the keyword on the card in the middle, is going to be placed in the leftmost available lane. Now, if no lanes are available, and there's actually 6 lanes across, if there's not a single lane available at this point in time, that card instead is going to go on top of the outsider pile. We're now going to go ahead and resolve new Horde cards. So for each newly placed Horde card, starting with the leftmost one, we're going to do these 3 steps in order. If the card has a mana boost value on it, we're going to gain some mana. The mana boost would show up in the top left-hand corner, or it will show this phase icon up here of 1, which means I'm getting absolutely nothing. So nothing there on that front for me, unfortunately. The second step is to resolve any play, keyword play ability on the revealed card. There is one in the center. center. This one says the Deep Stalker deals 2 damage to the castle armor 1. Now, as you clearly can see on the bottom of the card, we have the attack value on the left-hand side, and we have the health value of this enemy. It now also has a shield token on it, as it's stated from the play ability triggering. We also need to place some damage on my castle. If we end up taking 20 damage, the castle's destroyed and we lose the game, so it didn't take long for us to get some damage right out of the gates, but there are ways to mitigate the damage that is placed on the castle. So 2 on it, but you'll see when we get into a further phase, we could potentially exhaust this, paying a mana to choose one of 3 different options on it. We could either remove 2 of these health hits against it, or we could remove 1 from an ally, or we could draw a card. The second step of resolving a Horde card is done. Now the third step is if the revealed card was instead a spell, we discard it. And it would tell us if it was a spell quite easily based on the keywords on the card. Now we head into the alliance phase, and there's a number of actions we can choose to perform, and we can do them any number of times and in any order that we wish. The first thing we could do is to play an alliance card. And if we want to do this, we simply pay the indicated mana cost by moving the tracker in the center of the playmat to the left. So I've gone ahead and decided to play Clan of the Oak, which costs 3 mana, so I dropped myself from 4 down to 1. Also, there's an ability on the card that could be really useful. Our Royal Guard ally states, as long as Clan of the Oak has no neighbors, in other words, nobody to the left or right in terms of the lanes, there's definitely nobody to the left, and there is nobody to the right currently, they gain 1 armor. So this card is going to get a token very similar to the Deep Stalker. You can carry over mana from one turn to the next, however, the maximum mana you can possibly have is 10. That's going to do it for everything I want to accomplish in the alliance phase, but let's talk about the other things I could do in any order and as many times as I wish. Another thing I could do is engage minions. We have 2 minions here, 2 minions over there. The differences between them mainly is that some of them have health and some don't. Now, why does this matter? If they stay in the back line where they're currently at during the pillaging phase, you're going to count up how many health markers are across all of these minions, and that is how many cards you're going to discard from the alliance deck. They are going to pillage your deck, dwindling it down, trying to make you lose. If you choose to engage a minion, there's 2 things you need to know. One is it needs to have at least 1 health on it in order to engage it, and the second thing is you need to have an ally in the lane that matches the lane you're bringing the minion into. So in other words, I couldn't engage this minion into this space right here if I have nothing here to deal with it. The advantage to engaging the minion, if I was able to place an ally here and then choose to engage this one into this slot, is that that health marker will not count towards the total on the back line when it goes to the pillaging phase for me to lose alliance cards. So this is a way you can strategically avoid your deck from being pillaged. Now, if you satisfy the constraints and you bring the minion in and you have an ally across from it, if at any point in time the minion is unengaged again, then it returns back to the line. So you could do something like, and this is actually another thing you can do during the alliance phase, is you can move allies between lanes. So I could actually have an ally in here, choose to engage the minions here, and then I could move this ally over here. And if I did that, the minion that's here would go right back to the back line. And of course, that's just an example as to how a minion can become unengaged and go back to the back line. Now, it's also worth noting that when you engage a minion, it always comes into the leftmost space that hasn't been filled. Something else you can do during the alliance phase is to use your exhaust abilities. Of course, you have to have the card in play to do this. So bad example here, but I have one in my hand. Let's say this was actually paid for and it was actually in a lane. I could go ahead and shift it down to the exhausted area of the playmat in order to use the exhaust ability on the card. Now, what's cool to note about exhausting for abilities is that it does not prevent you from using them during the fight phase to actually do combat, which is nice, because there's some games where you'll exhaust a card and it becomes essentially useless for the entire round until it's refreshed in the next round. This game's different. The final thing you can do inside the alliance phase is you can discard alliance cards in play. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, there's a type of card, for example, called a tower in this game. And when you get it, and actually I had one in my first hand of 5, if you want to go back and take a look at it, but basically once it comes into play, you can't use one of the actions in the alliance phase to move it around the lanes like you would with an ally, for instance. So in other words, once the tower comes in a designated slot, it sits there. And as time goes on, it could shuffle its way down to a position that's not strategically good for what you're trying to accomplish. And in those cases, you might want to discard it. So that's where that action comes into play. And that's going to do it for the Alliance phase. So to sum everything up you can do inside of it, you can play Alliance cards so long as you have the mana. You can engage minions so long as you meet the constraints around engaging them. You can use exhaust abilities on your cards. You can move allies between lanes, but you cannot move towers between lanes. And you can discard Alliance cards in play. Now we move to the Treachery phase. We're going to go ahead and draw a card off the top of this deck, and we're only focused on icons which are on the left or right-hand side of the illustration. In this case, on the left-hand side. Whether it's on the left or right will actually distinguish which of the monsters in the row above they're going to affect, the leftmost or the rightmost. In this case, doesn't matter because we only have one, but if we had two and the sword was on the left side, it's going to bolster this enemy with an additional attack value, increasing how much overall damage it will do later on. If this sword was on the opposite side and we actually had a card over here, then it would go on the rightmost monster. Now, it's not always going to be about bolstering the attack of the monsters. You also could potentially get, as a Treachery card, a bolt on the card. And if you get the bolt, it doesn't matter about leftmost and rightmost. All you're going to go ahead and resolve is the Treachery on the card itself. The final part of the Treachery phase allows the Alliance to use reaction abilities. Of course, if they actually have them, they contain the lightning bolt icon. That's how you'll know they can be used during this part of the Treachery phase. So after that Treachery card comes out, changes the game state in some negative way, you have an ability to react. You can either play spells with a lightning bolt icon and a play keyword. You'll see play keywords across some of the cards I have in my hand here, but no lightning bolt before it, so none of them can be used right now. But if I did have one, you could pay the mana cost and any additional cost it might ask for in order to play it. The other thing you can do is take a look at the cards you have in play and check to see whether there is a bolt and exhaust keyword on the card. If there is, you could potentially exhaust a card at this point in order to use a reaction ability. And again, you would just simply move the card down if you did. This one does not have that on it, so I can't do it, but it's very easy to identify this. Again, just seeing the lightning bolt icon and the keyword exhaust, and you'll know you can pull it off at this point. Now we move into the fight phase, which is quite easy. What we're going to do is resolve each lane one at a time from left to right. So basically lane 1, 2, 3, all the way down. We only have lane 1 filled right now, so that's the only one we have to worry about. The first thing we're going to do is resolve any Horde fight abilities. The keyword is fight. It'll be in bold right on the card itself. If there isn't one, you don't have to resolve it. Same next step for the Alliance, which we don't have any fight abilities, so nothing to resolve there. So at this point, monsters and allies are going to strike each other. At this point, what we do is we take a look at what's in the lane. We currently have a monster and an ally. So because of this, simultaneously, we're going to deal damage to each unit equal to the opposing unit's attack value. So you'll see here we have 2, which is 3, thanks to that boost there. And down here, we have 3 as well. So 3 versus 3. The only difference is there is some defense going on here. So if you take a look at the armor value that's been placed on both of the cards, that is going to absorb one of the damage being dealt. So we go ahead and flip over the armor token to its pierced armor side, letting us know we've used that to basically take one of the hits that would have gone against that particular unit, and then of course the rest of the damage goes through. But in both cases, it's not enough to actually kill off either the ally or the monster. Now let's talk about drawing Alliance cards. So how does this happen? Well, there are some game effects that allow you to do this. My current castle allows me to use an exhaust ability, paying a mana in order to potentially choose one of the options that are 3 available. One of them is to draw a card, so that's one way. But another way, which is the more common way, is to kill or destroy a monster that includes epic monsters, outsiders, and minions. If you take any of those 3 types down, you get to draw a card. So that resolves the fight. Now let's talk about a hypothetical situation where we didn't have an ally here whatsoever. The only thing that was here was just this monster. Well, where would that damage go? Well, there's nobody defending in that lane, so the damage that would come through would go right against the castle. And as another hypothetical example, if my ally was the only one in the lane making an attack over here against the Horde, it is going to have its damage go against the portal. The portal has a certain amount of health it can take before it is destroyed. When it is destroyed, it is going to be changed out at a given point inside of the game. We'll talk more about that later on, but it's worth mentioning in both of these hypothetical examples that would obviously change in terms of any damage coming back. There wouldn't be any tokens here because nothing would have actually hit us. We would have just done a complete and easy strike against the opposite side. And that's going to do it for the fight phase because we have no more lanes to go ahead and continue to resolve. So we're going to move on to the pillage phase. Now, just before we move to the pillage phase, let's talk quickly about damage on the portal. In my hypothetical example, I talked about the fact that if the Clan of the Oak, my current ally card, was able to make an attack straight through to the portal because there wasn't any deep stalkers there on the other side, then 3 damage would have been placed on the portal instead of the deep stalkers. And again, once we get up to 6, it states on the card, it's actually not in the current rulebook as printed, but will likely be changed in the future, as to how it operates once you get up to 6 damage. It states, at the end of the turn, when this portal is destroyed, reveal the next portal card in its upright orientation. Because as I talked about before, and you'll see very soon, this thing is going to rotate. So if it gets destroyed when it's rotated like this, the next card that comes in is not going to come in rotated, it will come in upright. Destroying the Stage 1 portal is all part of the game plan, and when Stage 2 portal comes into play, it will state on it to summon all cards in the outsider pile at the end of the next Horde phase. That can be quite fun. It's either going to be just the outsider, or if you had so many lanes full of monsters that you were unable to control them, they started to spill on top of the outsider pile, you're going to have more than just the outsider coming out when that triggers. And when that Horde phase comes around, you're going to have the outsider pile coming into the lanes from left to right, and you're going to be dealing with trying to take the outsider down in its first stage, and then after that, it's going to come back for revenge in its second stage, and if you take that one down, then you win. That'll wrap up quite the segue between the fight phase and the pillage phase, as there was a number of things to think about, be aware of between the minions, the portals, the outsider, how you draw cards, and how the battles actually resolve themselves. But now we're moving to the pillage phase, and this is actually very simple. We take a look at the back row or back line of cards of minions, we take a look at the health across them, we total it up, and that's how many cards we discard off the top of the Alliance deck. The Alliance deck is pillaged by 3 cards in the discard pile, so not only is my drawing of cards into my hand depleting it, but those pillaging actions are also hurting me too from the backline minions. Again, if you want to mitigate this, during the Alliance phase, you're going to go ahead and engage minions, bringing them into a lane, of course making sure there's actually an ally on the opposite side in order to engage them. This will ensure that during the pillage phase, the hearts that are on that particular minion do not count as part of the back line, so they do not count in the total that ends up hitting your Alliance deck. So if you're doing a good job engaging minions and attacking them and taking all their health off their cards and keeping them at 0, then when the back line does its pillaging action, they're not going to have as many of those heart tokens on the cards, which means you won't be depleting so much of your deck. So again, these won't stay at just a single heart. Over time, treachery abilities and other in-game effects are going to bolster these cards and make them nastier and nastier if you leave them alone. The final thing to do in the pillage phase is any engaged minions that happen to be in any of the lanes are now going to go back to the back line. We've now reached the end phase, and if the portal's been destroyed, we discard that portal, bring in the next staged portal, place it upright in this slot. Otherwise, and the otherwise applies to me in this case, we're going to go ahead and rotate clockwise the portal that we currently have. And last but not least, we're going to go ahead and discard down to 7 cards. That's currently not a problem for us. We only have 4, and we move to the next round. We start things off by gaining mana based on the portal card in play, which is 4. We currently had 1 left over from the last turn, which we've carried over, so we get 5 mana to start. We ready any exhausted cards, but we don't currently have any. And also, any of these pierced armor tokens, they're going to come back as armor. The armor value always returns to its full value at the start of the next turn, so we've gone ahead and done that for both of the cards here in this situation, and we're ready to move on to the Horde phase. Well, that's certainly unfortunate. We got ourselves a Frost Giant. This does have a play effect. The ability states the Frost Giant's going to deal 3 damage to the castle unless an ally of the Alliance takes 5 damage. That's pretty nasty. I decided to place the 3 damage on the castle even though it does hurt. I do have the ability to mitigate this. We'll do some exhausting abilities during the Alliance phase to take away 2 of the damage of the 3 that just got placed on. And speaking of the Alliance phase, that's exactly the phase I'm walking into right now, which allows me to use exhaust abilities. I'm going to go ahead and pay a mana, so I've dropped from 5 to 4, and I'm going to choose one of the 3 options I have here. I can take 2 of the damage away from my castle, so now I'm just at 3. Now going into this Alliance phase, I have 2 trains of thought because I have 4 mana left. I could spend 3 mana to bring Clan of the Falcon in here, but that would be a neighboring card. It would take away the shield, unfortunately, but this thing could be exhausted to give a shield and a sword over here, but that wouldn't stop it from dying when the Deep Stalker attacks, although I would be able to kill the Deep Stalker, so it'd be a 1-for-1 there. But either way, as of right now, it's a 1-for-1, so there's no real point in going with this. I'm kind of looking at these 2 over here. I'm going to go ahead and spend all of my mana to bring both in. Of course, having a neighbor here impacted the armor that thing has. But again, when it does its simultaneous attack, it's not going to matter. It's going to have enough to be able to kill it, and it's going to die anyway. So I'm not really concerned about having a neighbor there anymore. These ones being here could be really helpful. I'm keeping the shaman safe by having it in the lane by itself. So later on, I can potentially exhaust it for a mana. But let's go ahead and take a look at the play actions here. We have a play on this card. It says remove up to 2 damage from the castle and exhaust the shaman. So we're going to go ahead and exhaust it. We're going to go ahead and remove 2 from here. So that's going to make it a 1. So that's quite nice. So we've really gone ahead and mitigated a lot of what happened to the castle early on in the game. And that's really going to do it for the alliance phase. I have nothing else I want to do. I don't want to discard any cards for sure. Let's go into the treachery phase and see what happens. The card is a +1 for attacking on the Deep Stalker, which really isn't going to impact things all that much because I know that this card was in trouble anyway. So that's actually A-okay. I want to pause for a moment to make a correction based on a treachery card boost of attack that I got in round number 1, which is only good for the given turn that it's inside of. In other words, that first round. So one of these +1 attack tokens should no longer be here. And of course, when I just drew a new treachery card, I got the exact same effect again. So there should be just 1 here. And from the alliance side, I plan to play nothing in terms of a reaction to the treachery phase. So we're going to go ahead now into the fight phase. The fight phase has us resolving each lane in order, so lane number 1 to start things off. Do we have any fight keyword on the monster card here? We do not. Do we have a fight keyword down here on the ally? We do not. So we're moving on to the ally and the monster striking each other at the exact same time. My ally is coming at it with 3 hits, which is certainly going to be enough. 3 hitting this thing, 1 defended by the shield, 2 getting through, more than enough to go past the 3 HP to take it out. Nothing else beyond the damage of the monster is going to go past though and injure the portal. In this case, it's all still just focused on the monster I'm attacking. And same thing here for this enemy, which is now going to attack back at me for 2 plus the 1 is 3, which is more than enough to take out my Clan of the Oak, being that it's already injured. So the 3 damage that gets put on the Clan of the Oak does not trickle on to my castle past the 3 HP of the card. So it's not like I get 3 damage, place 1 here, and 2 goes on the castle. The only way that would happen is if you have a minion or another monster that actually has the keyword trample on it. Trample means that excess damage is going to go through to the castle. So if you happen to engage a minion in the line and you're fighting it, well, that is going to be the con of going after minions. Their damage, when they start getting stronger by having a lot more health on them, that's going to equal what their attack value will be. It's going to go right past whatever ally you have if you can't defend against it. So the lane is completely empty now, and because I took down a monster, I get to draw a card off the top of my alliance deck. I drew up Bloodlust. This is a spell that I can actually use as a reactionary card. The first one that I've got, it has a bolt in front of it, says play, an ally gains +2 attack and +1 armor for the remainder of the turn. So this is a great spell to potentially use right after a treachery card has come out and thrown something really interesting into the equation. You can react with this type of a card. Now we move to lane number 2 to resolve. We take a look at the monster over here, and it does not have a keyword for fight, but my Clan of the Wildcat does. So let's take a look and see what we could potentially do. It says you may return Clan of the Wildcat to the owner's hand. If you do, any non-outsider monster, and that would be the Frost Giant, who was engaged with them does not deal damage during this fight. So I've decided to pull Clan of the Wildcat back into my hand using the fight ability. A very handy ability it is, especially in a situation where I know the Clan of the Wildcat only had a 2 attack, which wouldn't have been enough to take out the Frost Giant, but the Frost Giant would have had enough damage to fully kill off the Wildcat. So what I've done essentially is pull that back into my hand. I can potentially bring it out in a future round, maybe bolster it with a spell or some kind of reactionary spell to allow myself to maybe have a better chance of taking out an enemy. And I also get the benefit that this thing, after using my fight ability, does not get to have its attack go straight through to my castle. It basically becomes nothing, null and void, which is awesome. And last but certainly not least, we have the shamans here, and even though they are exhausted, they can still make an attack. There's nothing in the lane across, which means the attack is going to go straight through. I don't have any fight abilities on this anyway, so I'm happy to have this damage go straight through, and it's going to hit the portal. And just like that, we place damage on the portal for the very first time. We've got 5 more to take it out. We now move to the pillage phase for any minions that are not in lanes. In other words, are in the back row that actually have health on them. We have 3 cards with health on them, and it equals 3 total health. That many cards are coming off the alliance deck. So most likely a good focus for me going into the next round will be to try to engage at least 1 minion to start pecking away at the health that's up there in the back row. And at this point, any minions that happen to be in the lanes would go back to the back of the line. There are none, so we skip that. We go to the end phase. At this point, the gate is going to rotate once again. It'll be flipped this way, and we're luckily going to have a 0 this time around. We also have nothing to worry about in terms of discarding cards down to 7. We have no tokens on any of the cards that need to be rejuvenated after the turn. So at this point in time, we're going ahead and gaining our mana. So we're currently at 0. We'll be jumping up to 4 based on the portal card. We're also refreshing any cards that were exhausted, so the shamans are being refreshed. Thanks to the portal card being on 0, we don't have any horde card to draw this turnaround, but at the end of the horde phase, you always take a look at all your lanes, and you're going to adjust them to shuffle them down to the left. So this frost giant will move to this position. So we head into the alliance phase. I'm going to choose right off the bat to exhaust my shamans, and now that they're actually in play, I'm able to go ahead and exhaust them and now start gaining a mana when I do that, which is awesome. So I'm now bumped up to 5, and at this point, I'm going to go ahead and exhaust my Gaping Maw castle card in order to pay a mana, which is the one I just gained, going right back down, in order to draw a card from the top of the deck. Let's see what we get. We got ourselves another Clan of the Wildcat. So we're going to go ahead, maybe now, take a look at what we've got here. We got 4 mana to spend. We have Clan of the Falcon, which is a very nice card. It does 2 hits and has only 1 health, which is not all that great. But honestly, the Clan of the Wildcat might be the way to go. We've got 2 of them, so why not get them both into play? Let's go ahead and actually pay all 4 in order to get both of these into lanes. So at this point, I'm done placing alliance cards into lanes. I also don't feel like shuffling anything around in terms of where they're situated. Quite happy with where they're at. Let's go ahead and engage a minion in order to start weakening them because they've been pestering my alliance deck for a couple rounds now. So I'm choosing to engage these minions. The reason being is that I'm pretty comfortable with the Clan of the Wildcat sticking around during the fight phase and not using its fight ability, which means it will get hit for 1 damage based on the attack coming from here. It might look like 0, but it actually gets a +1 for every single heart token on it. So it'd be attack of 1 coming through during the fight phase, and I'm very, very safe with Clan of the Wildcat having 3 health to survive this. That's why I'm not going to go ahead and engage another minion from the back row, because the shamans would not be able to handle that damage without losing it, and I like the shamans card because of the ability to generate mana every turn. That is very handy. The Treachery card came out, and it is Stormcaller. We only care about the icons left or right. This has a +1 attack going to the leftmost cards, plus the Frost Giant, getting that bonus, which is good because based on my plan or strategy here, I'm going to go ahead and probably use the fight ability in this card to completely get this thing out of here and prevent anything from coming through. And again, as a reminder, I can go ahead and use reactionary cards at this point to the Treachery card that was played. So a card like Bloodlust that I collected earlier, but I don't have the mana to spend for it, would have been a really cool spell to use to bolster one of my allies by 2 attack and an armor, but we'll save it for another time when I actually have some mana to spend. On to the fight phase. Well, we're going to take a look at lane number 1. Again, taking a look for the fight keyword up here. Nothing, but we do have 1 down here. Definitely going to go ahead and use it, bringing Clan of the Wildcat back to my hand. This is not going to end up doing any damage to me whatsoever thanks to that ability, so we'll take this token off as it's only there for 1 turn anyway. Moving on to lane number 2, we have an actual battle happening here. This one's going to be attacking me for 1, which is going to get through because I have absolutely no defense whatsoever in terms of shields, but I am doing 2 damage back on it. I could have also gone ahead and pulled this away as well for the fight keyword, but I'm choosing not to. We're going to the battle. I've done 1 damage here. We're doing 2 damage back to this thing, which removes this off, and this goes back to the back line. Now it has no health, so it won't have any impact whatsoever when we're counting up health during the pillage phase. And the shamans are going to help me out by going ahead and attacking 1 straight through with no defense against it in lane, which means we have another damage on the portal. Now in the pillage phase, we have 2 health on 2 of the back row minions, so 2 cards coming off the alliance deck into the discard pile, unfortunately. We have no more minions in the lanes to go to the back row, so we skip past that step and we head into the end phase. We did not destroy the portal, so we're going to go ahead and rotate it. This time around in the Horde phase, we're definitely going to be pulling a card. And lastly, make sure you don't have more than 7 cards in hand, otherwise discard down to 7 cards maximum, and that's going to end off the round, as well as ending off this game overview and gameplay video for Skytear Horde from Skytear Games. This game is coming back to crowdfunding for those interested in the early portions of May. The exact dates and the campaign link can be found in the pinned comment and video description. Would love to hear from the community about your thoughts on this one, what you saw in this video, as well as if you already have the game on the table from the first campaign. Let us know what you think about it. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope this helps you make an informed decision on it. And as always, keep on rolling solo.